Hey, welcome to Manifest 360, the podcast that helps you to align your life, energy, and actions with what truly matters. Today, we're diving into clarity of purpose, what it really means, why it's more than a motivational phrase, and how to find and keep the steady compass in a noisy world. And I'll tell you what, Vipin, the world is a noisy, noisy place. And you know what? You can easily be taken off over here and over there. And I sometimes have a hard time just focusing on the stuff that's right in front of me. Squirrel.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I don't think you're alone. I think in this world of technology and social media and instant messages, our attention span is a lot shorter than it used to be. And it's a challenge. One of the keys to not be distracted is to have a clarity on your purpose. That means kind of your inner purpose, the way of being, and your outer purpose, of which is the things that you want to be and achieve, and so the purpose of kind of your life in a sense, or your at least a short-term purpose of 3 to 5 years of your life. So yeah, it's a challenge. We think we can help you with that. We talked about Money and Mantras, the book, and a mantra that we use, and I use a lot. And I had a friend in a group brought it up to me again that one of the best things that he's learned in the last 30 days is he's learned the mantra, I am calm, centered, and loving. So one of the ways to be focused in the moment is to be calm, centered, and loving. Now in business, as I mentioned, I changed the word loving to focus. I'm calm, centered, and focused.
Right.
And the point of being centered, you only can become centered when you're calm. And when we get frazzled, we get distracted easily. And by our own emotions, by the outside noise, may that be world politics, may that be current events in our city, current events in our family, things like that. So the idea is to be present in the moment, and it's hard to do unless you have a mechanism, a protocol, a framework to doing that, thinking. And we recommend repeating the mantra, I'm calm, centered, and loving.
We've been talking, well, you mentioned your book earlier, so I want to bring that up. I want to bring up a congratulations and a kudos to you. But Clarity of Purpose is the title of the podcast today. And I'm glad that you had the clarity and the purpose of setting your mind to something quite a while ago and achieving that, and you heard some good news this past week.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it from a standpoint of it's the work of a lifetime, and we talked about Colonel Sanders and how he took 1,007 no's before he got a yes. My journey of writing a book and getting it published by a traditional publisher has been the same. You remember our friend from high school that I mentioned that thought that I was going to be an author, and in high school mentioned Dan Riley, said that
Yep.
He knows and sees me as being a motivational speaker, author. And I've always wanted to do that. In 2005, I started writing a book. I even built an elaborate website. I think I spent like $6,000 or $7,000 back then building a website. And I was not successful, and life got in the way, and I moved on to other things. And then 2.5 years ago, I thought about writing a book again. And this time, I had more clarity of purpose, and I was more determined. And this time, as things would have it, the last 20 years worth of experience in my life have taught me that I actually have knowledge based on experience, not just textbooks, of what I want to share. So all those years of mantras, all those years of meditation, all those years of business success and failures and all of that stuff has led me, and the book title changed about 6 months ago, and it is now, the book is called Money and Mantras, How to Align Your Energies for Purpose and Prosperity. And so it's a combination. Money is a very difficult word for a lot of people, and it can be challenging. We've talked about that. But how to really align that with mantras, and mantras is kind of a spiritual thing. So how do you align money with spiritual? paradigm, thinking, mindset, and then your actions and behaviors. We want you to make money and be successful without selling your soul, essentially. And so that's kind of what it's about. We got news this week that a amazing, one of the best publishers in the country, not the biggest, one of the best, had made a written offer on publishing this book. And then we have another major publisher also interested, but aligning with my energies, I think I'm going to go with the one that I think is really high quality, the one that has gave us a written offer already. And so I'm super excited about that. It's taken a long time for the last 2.5 years, lots of rejections, definitely over 500 rejections to get to this stage. We finally got an agent who's amazing in September. And then now that agent has helped us get an amazing publisher for the book.
See, that's awesome. I mean, you set your mind to it, and you move forward, and you have it happen. I just want to take a step back into the whole Dan Riley thing. I know that we've talked about him in the past, and the fact that he said that you should be an author and a motivational speaker. And the one thing that kind of got me on that, I could see the author from back when we were in high school, but when we were in high school, I didn't really know what a motivational speaker was at the time. I obviously know what they are now because I'm 57 years old and I've lived a pretty meaningful life and done a lot of things in my life. But back in those days, to have that type of what's the word I'm looking for, where he kind of sees that that's something that you could do and be back then, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I had not heard of Anthony Robbins and a lot of these guys either.
I think that they're within the last 20 years, and we were in high school almost 40 years ago. You know?
No, I think it was 34 years ago is when I read Anthony Robbins' book, and I went to his workshops and things like that. Spent a few $100 on going to his workshop. I stand in the front row, right there in Minneapolis at the convention center, for 2 days, and it's those. There's always talks of motivational speakers, but I didn't know who they were or what their top guys were. And again, motivational is also interesting to me. I'm not as attached to that word anymore. I'm more attached to an inspirational speaker, somebody who can inspire you to do great things. Motivation, I think, is fleeting, like in the world of short-term attention span. Motivation lasts a shorter time, and inspiration is deeper. And getting to that deeper meaning, the deeper why you want to do something, that's your purpose. And having clarity on your purpose, the topic of today, having clarity means you'll work 20 years and keep getting back to that goal. It means you'll work for 2.5 years in a row, consistently, part-time, while you have a day job, while you have a family, while you do all of these things. You consistently work at it. And here we are, 3 years, essentially, 2 years since we started this podcast, almost to the day. And here we are that we're able to start this journey. And I've been saying this, bigger and better things are on the horizon, and they're starting to happen.
You said the word inspirational, but I also think educational, because you are a very learned person, and you break things down, I think, oftentimes to bite-sized pieces that we can understand. I mean, I knew nothing about the chakra system before we started doing the podcast. I knew nothing about mantras before we started doing the podcast. And, the whole calm-centered loving thing. And even though you kind of changed that other word from loving to focused, the calm-centered loving has helped me not only in my business, but it's also helped me in my relationships with my kids and with my partner and with other people as well. So I mean, not only inspirational, Vipin, but educational as well.
Yeah, and I think we talked last week about mentors and coaches, right?
Absolutely, we did.
And remember the guy who was the president of Toastmasters International, and he said to me, "Your enthusiasm for learning is going to be the key to your success." Mm-hmm. So the last 34 years since I got his message, I've been focusing on learning and getting better. And there's two different kinds of learning, right? There's three different kinds of learning, I think. One is textbooks, and they help. It's definitely a good start. Then is experience, and then is learning and adjusting on the fly and or more effective, which is coaching and through mentorship. So, and we talked about the difference between coaching and mentorship. Coaching is more consistent, more commitment. Mentorship is lighter. It's more about advice, whereas a coach holds you more accountable. And so all three ways of learning has really helped me a lot, and I think that's what we want to do. And part of Manifest 360 and part of our thing is going to be helping coach people to be the best that they can be.
So, Vipin, how do you distinguish purpose from passion?
Perfect. On our website, actually, there is a protocol on how to come up with your purpose, and there's a framework for that. I think if you click on purpose-driven goals on the website, you can get there. But basically, passions are things that you get excited about, right? Things that you want to do because you love doing it. Oftentimes, we get confused by things that we think we want to do rather than things that we actually love doing. I've heard a lot of people mention to rock stars. Let's use an example of rock stars. And a lot of people go up to rock stars and say, man, I wish I was as talented as you were. I wish I could be doing what you're doing. And I remember one of the rock stars saying, no, you don't, because you don't know how many hours I put in practicing the guitar in my garage and practicing singing and failing and all those hours of my fingers bled and all of this stuff. You don't see that part of it. I loved it so much that I put in the time into it. That's how I ended up where I did. And so passion is really the key, but you have to be passionate in the act of doing something. It isn't just a wish of, I love playing football. Well, I love playing football. Are you dedicated to lifting weights? Are you dedicated to sprinting? Are you dedicated to getting a coach and get a team and get your butt kicked and tackled and all this stuff, right? So it's passion is more lasting than a kind of a wish, more than things that you like. And then you asked about purpose, right? You asked, what's the difference between passion and purpose? Passion is something that you love doing. Purpose is when you take that thing that you love and you share that with the world. Mm-hmm. So you could be a artist, musician, author, sculpturist, painter, whatever. When you share that with the world, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to share it for them for money. A lot of people get confused by the idea that you have to have a way of making money with your passion. You could have a day job and work as a writer or work as a musician at night and share your passion with people that have a purpose. My coach, as I mentioned, is a retired guy. He's passionate about theater. He was going to be a theater major at University of Minnesota. I think he was a theater major at University of Minnesota. Went on to become a professor at a university in California. He came back and he loves theater, and he just was a director for a show in his town, and he conducted the show, and it was success and all of this stuff, and so he lives his passion. There's a famous author, Elizabeth Gilbert, and she has a book. She has many books, but she started out with this very famous book called Eat, Pray, Love, and how she kind of found her passion, and through that, they've ended up being a bestseller, sold tens of millions of copies, ended up being a movie, and then one of the books that she wrote, I think is called Big Magic or something like that, and she talks about the art of creativity, and how do you create, how do you work on your passion, how do you work on your purpose, and she made a very clear distinction. If you love something so much and you want to share that with the world, you do it even though you can't make money on it. You make money in your day job. She works as a waitress. She worked as a freelance writer, full-time jobs, until she could make money off of it. But she kept on doing it. She recommends for writers specifically, keep doing it because you love the craft. And that's what passion turned into purpose is all about.
A lot of this reminds me of when I was a kid. I remember a joke that my dad told, and it really wasn't a joke, but it was more like a saying that a father would say. But he always used to say that, one guy said to another guy, "How do you get to Carnegie Hall?" And the guy just said, "Practice, man, practice." And at the time, I didn't really get that. And, I laughed because his buddies all thought it was funny. I was like, "Oh, yeah, Bob, that's funny." But now, as an adult, and a lot of what you're saying is that it truly does take practice, man. Practice in order to get to Carnegie Hall, in order to get that book published, in order to, you mentioned the rock stars earlier about played till his fingers bled. It's all about the practice of your craft, not knowing if you're going to make it, but doing it, putting in the hard work that it takes in order to have something happen in your life. It's the little steps. It's the practice. It's the constantly doing things and getting better at it over time that puts you in the upper echelon of people that are doing what it is that you're trying to do and trying to achieve.
And I think a lot of inspirational leaders will tell you that you can become whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. And I think you can. I think it will take some time. It can happen as soon as 6 months to a year for some people. It can happen 21 years later, like for me, writing the book. And so are you willing to put in the time and the consistent behavior on learning your craft for 21 years? And so, yeah, I would have loved to have been a rock star inspirational leader at the age of 35, 36. And I went to New York and I met some famous inspirational author. And I got hugs from some of the bestsellers. But I went to a conference on personal development and self-help spiritual stuff. I met some really awesome guys. And I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. I didn't know my craft. I didn't know what I wanted to teach about. I didn't know the power of chakras and the power of mantras and how it's affected my life and how it's affecting you and how, I get attached to this thing called I'm calm, centered, and loving. And it's like my messaging around it because it's friggin' powerful. It's the most powerful thing I can share with the world. What else do you want more than being calm, centered, and loving? You can achieve a lot in life if you're calm, centered, and loving. And you will attract things with the word loving because you put that energy of love out there. You're not trying to control people with love. You're trying to share with people this positive energy. And then more people will be attracted to you, whatever your purpose is. You work on that. You get clarity around it. And so you'll be able to do amazing things. And if I can give you a tool to do that, that's perfect. Now, we're talking about clarity of purpose here. We're not just talking about the base mantra here, right? So clarity of purpose, there's two different kind of purposes that I recently learned. I thought purpose was always external, meaning you wanted to achieve certain things and you wanted to do certain things. And I sent you a meme / quote this morning from a guy, very famous. He wrote a book called The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. And he talks about when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling fearful, our inner purpose is disturbed because our outer purpose has taken over. So the base mantra that I give to people is all about the inner purpose, the inner calm-centered way of being. That's really what we need to work on. An external purpose is things that you want to achieve, things that you want to accomplish, things that you want to do for a career or whatever, right? And so the outer purpose is really critical, but it's super dependent on your inner purpose, your inner compass. So when things don't go right, so let me just give you an example of what happened this week for me. We got the book offer late on Friday. As you know, I have a full-time job as a tech leader in a pretty big company. And I was in a meeting with some executives, and one of the executives was very aggressive, threw the meeting off. Knowing myself and having done the research for this meeting and the topic, I brought up that this executive was inaccurate in their assumptions. This executive has been hammering on these assumptions for the last month. I said that we wanted to meet with you yesterday. You canceled the meeting. It's okay. We'll reschedule and we'll do it. But what you're saying and what you keep hammering isn't accurate. And then the meeting ended with the follow-up action items. I was going to send him an email. My CEO was there. My boss wasn't there for whatever reason. Half an hour later, I get a text from my boss who's on a plane to the East Coast from Seattle. He says, "Hey, how did the meeting go?" I'm like, "Okay, but I must not have gone that well because I'm assuming you probably heard back from the CEO." He's like, "Yeah, he sent me an email." There's no reason that my boss would send me a message from a plane unless something bad would have happened. And so I got rattled. I got thrown off my inner compass, my inner purpose. I wasn't calm and centered. I wasn't freaking out. I had to focus my energy on being calm and centered. That event led to some things changing from a protocol on how we're going to address these things that the client wants. But I had done the research in my work, and even I had done everything that I could control. The outcome was not something I could control. It went negative on me. And the next day I had a same meeting with a different meeting, different topic with the CEO and then with my boss on the same topic. So things were still rattled for me for 2 days. And we're talking about it today because it still has an impact on my life. So I've had to practice and work on accepting the outcomes that didn't feel good. That's the external purpose. I had to work on my inner compass of being calm, centered, and loving to myself, saying I did the best that I could. I'm not going to judge myself. I'm not going to beat myself up. It is what it is. Whatever is God and the universe's will happen, and everything's going to go on. Later on that evening on Fridays when I found out about the great news, right? That's my ultimate purpose, is to be the author, the speaker, the motivational guy. I want to be doing these podcasts with you on a daily basis, or at least 2 or 3 times a week. That's really ultimately how I want to spread the message. I'm on my way to doing that, but it's not happening right now. So I have to be a little bit patient. And so, but being rattled, getting my inner purpose back, I'm able to have this conversation with you in a calm, centered, loving, focused way to say, hey, these are things in real life that'll happen. Your outer purpose is going to get rattled, and you got to adjust on the fly. And how do you do that? Have a mantra. Have a way to clear your thinking. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that kind of brings me into the next thing that I wanted to ask you about or to bring up today is that, you know, there's common roadblocks that are in each and every one of our lives. We've talked about Toastmasters many times throughout the course of doing this podcast, and I shared with you last week, I believe, that I'm afraid to talk in front of people. Well, I emceed something yesterday, so I got over that roadblock. I got over the fear that was bothering me to do that. So, I mean, that's putting something aside, but a lot of people have those roadblocks like fear and inertia and wanting to be perfect at doing things. How do you jump over those hurdles and move forward with the things in your life that you want to do in order to achieve the success that you're looking to get?
Oh, man, that is such a tough question. It's rattled me for decades. And the question is how do you overcome fear, essentially?
We all have it every day. It sneaks in. Sometimes we're good at hiding it or stepping through it, but other times it can be crippling, Vipin.
It is very crippling. And so, you know, Elizabeth Gilbert in that book, I picked up that book in Ireland in the basement of a bookstore. I had no idea that she had written this book, and it was just kind of one of those books that just came out. Nobody recommended it to me. I love the book. I love Elizabeth Gilbert. I love the way she talks with raw honesty, right? And just the way she makes words dance is the way how I feel. In the book, she said, you can't overcome fear by trying to not be fearful. And this kind of hit me a little bit because in the Bible, in John something, like 3 or not 3:16, but like 3 something or John 1 or John 4, whatever, it says, true love casts off fear. That's the net of that phrase. I don't know. I'm not quoting the Bible directly, and I'm not a Bible thumper. I just happen to have attached to that because fear has been a huge driver in my life and how to overcome it. Mm-hmm. So in the recent book, last few years that she wrote this book, she says you can't overcome fear by trying to force it and trying to not be fearful. What she says, what I like as well, is acknowledge it, befriend it, almost laugh at it. and saying, okay, I'm fear of public speaking. It's kind of crazy, but why? What if I was really afraid of it? Is it going to stop me from doing something? And so for me, it's really important to acknowledge the fear and act anyways. Take the step, do that thought, go forward. Now, we've talked about higher power, the universe, intelligence, and God a lot. I just mentioned, I think you quoted, say John 4:16 is where that comes from. True love casts out fear. You're going to get fearful maybe daily, maybe weekly. Some fears are small, some fears are big. How you overcome, like I said, is acknowledging it, laugh at it if you can, try to be really fearful of the thing that you're in, play some mind games, but you got to act despite. Now, some fears are real. You should be fearful of going in front of a car on the freeway. You shouldn't be going and rattling a cage of a tiger, right? Or being on the wild without protection. And so fear serves a purpose. And we should acknowledge it and say, okay, what am I really afraid of? What if I really fail? And failing is not really a thing that a lot of successful people look into. Fear of failure is a huge one. And fear of failure in front of public is a mega one for public speaking, right? What if I look like an ass? Or what if I look like a jerk? You take it as a learning opportunity. When I was a public speaker in a public speaking class in Wisconsin, we all went to the bar before our big presentation and got a couple of shots in before the presentation.
That's a way to help.
Yeah, it's one way to help. It's not something I recommend. And it's, the other trick that the people say in public speaking is imagine your audience being naked, right? You kind of laugh at it. And so the fear is always going to be there. And what you need, we talked about the universe, intelligence, higher power, God. You need trust. And trust in a higher source can be very helpful in overcoming fear. Because in our life, we have experiences where we've trusted that we know serve us and help us get to the next step. For example, you and I have talked about this. You live close to a 2-lane highway. We all drive a 2-lane highway at some point during a week or during our lifetime, for sure. On a 2-lane highway, you're really trusting that they're going to...
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
You're trusting your life. And so the trust comes in, and you're not only trusting in God at that point, you're trusting the other person to stay in their lane. You're trusting a stranger who could be drunk, it could be high, could be crazy, could be having a seizure, whatever. And you're trusting in your ability to react if something goes wrong. You end up being in a ditch or whatever, but you're going to be adjusting really quickly. And that's why you've been driving. So that's the trust factor. So trusting is a big part of it. Trust that things will work out. Trust that you may fail, but you'll learn from it. Trust that you will go forward. Trust is a huge factor in overcoming. But it can only start if you acknowledge it. Sit with that fear. Think about it. And so fear, uncertainty, and doubt will cripple you, but don't let it cripple you. Acknowledge it and then move through it.
Any closing thoughts?
Bob, we talked a lot about clarity of purpose, but we get stuck with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? I read a book 30 years ago called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He survived Auschwitz. He went into the camps. He escaped out of Auschwitz through digging through sewer pipes that he found. And him and his friend in the camps escaped and went outside. You can imagine through the sewer pipes that they dug holes. And he decided at the last minute to go back in. And his friend said, "You're crazy, Victor. We just been working on this for months. Let's go and let's tell the world. Let's go save our fellow people that are in the camps with us." And Victor said, "I hear you, but I want to stay back to help the people. I feel like I was a shining light. I feel like I was there to help people. And so I'm going to go back and help them." The next day, the Russians came and freed the camp. And Viktor Frankl was saved by that. he went around asking the soldiers and the leaders, whoever he could find, saying, what happened to my friend? He escaped. They're like, yeah, we saw a body in the field. The Germans might have shot him on the way out. So his friend died. It's a famous story about searching for meaning in life, right? Doing the thing that you want to do and following your heart. And even despite incredibly painful events that he went through, right? His family dying and killed in the camps and all that. Well, Viktor Frankl became a top psychologist in the world. He was already a psychologist in Europe at the time. He wrote a second book that nobody's heard of. I've talked to a lot of Jewish leaders and rabbis and folks, and they haven't read his book. Doctor and the Soul. The Doctor and the Soul, Viktor talks about logotherapy, which is his therapy on how to overcome fear. I believe I was meant to read that book because it talks about how to overcome fear in his logotherapy. And the premise behind logotherapy is really about acknowledging the fear and figuring out a way to laugh at it. If you can laugh at your fear, if you can get to that stage, you will think it's silly and you'll act.
And that wraps up this episode of Manifest 360. If today's conversation sparks something in you, don't just think about it, apply it. Alignment isn't a vibe, it's a practice. Belief, emotion, strategy, and action, all moving in the same direction, that's where momentum lives. Be sure to follow, share with someone building something meaningful, and join us next week as we continue helping you manifest wealth and purpose. Manifest 360 is a podcastforhire.com production.